Good afternoon.
How are you?
I'm fantastic. You?
Good, good.
All right. What are we talking about today?
So,
welcome to the Agent Playbook.
that's right. So this is Jason and Travis, and thank you for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about a topic that has just been on everybody's mind. It's been in the news a lot, which is really how the agent commissions on the buyer side are in the contracts, on the MLS, and what we're seeing as a result is an actual erosion of the buyer agent commission and why that's happening.
Yep, absolutely.
Right. So let's kind of back up a little bit, and why don't you tell everyone watching like where and why and what changes have caused that erosion, and then how we can help our agents in the industry show their value to really combat this reduction in erosion.
Well, to cut to the chase, not going into all the detail of the Department of Justice and the lawsuits that are going on, essentially we've gotten to where buyer's agents really need to negotiate their commissions, which never happened in the past, right?
Right.
So the listing agent always took care of that, negotiating theirs as well as the buyer's agent's commissions with the seller. Now those have been decoupled, and we're looking at buyers having to present their value. And so thinking about this, we're definitely seeing an erosion, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think we see that. Talking to escrows and looking at transactions coming through, we're definitely getting away from that. Used to be 2.5 pretty solidly, and I would say we're kind of going down to the 1.5.
Yeah.
If you get 2, I think it's pretty good right now.
Yeah, at least from what we're seeing, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Well, if you ask me what that erosion is about is, well, I think we're going through a process. We're learning that the seller can offer a commission to the buyer if the buyer asks.
Sure.
They can agree. But what we're missing, I think, is that the buyer's agents have yet to really present themselves in a way where they can be firm with their buyers to ensure they get paid what they feel they're worth. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think there's a big misconception in the marketplace for what's gone on.
For sure, big time.
You know, so, I mean, it wasn't even 10 years ago, 15 years ago that the entire, population that was looking to buy a home had to go through an agent.
Yeah.
There was no Zillow or Redfin or online sites where they could look up. There were no apps for, agents to create and send out. It was like, hey, Travis, I want to buy a house. Can you show me some properties? Can we print out all the MLS stuff and see what's out there? Right?
Yeah.
So here we are now 10, 15 years later with the amount of information online. It's given the buyers a lot of power, which is great, right? We want information is power. With that said, there's been an attachment to the value being in finding the house alone.
Which is ridiculous.
Right. And that, so there's so many things that go through the buyer agent process with representing them, helping them to really look at different concessions outside of just price, right? I mean, so when you're in negotiations, what are some of the things that a buyer's agent can really talk about to help defend against that erosion and create that value?
That a buyer's agent can?
Yeah, for sure. If you're,
absolutely.
we're talking about really how to stop that erosion.
Oh, just being in the business, knowing the business, how to navigate a transaction, how to keep a transaction together, all the ins and outs of negotiating that, whether it be in the cost of things, in the liability of things.
Right.
And a lot of buyers just think they know everything about a property, and I think they're blind to a lot of things that they don't realize. So having that agent there is really important. I mean, literally identifying a property and driving around to access a property is what? 10, 15% of what the job is?
Absolutely.
I mean, you want your agent 85% or better vested in the transaction itself. That's where the real value comes in.
100%. And understanding like what potential repairs could be there that are unseen. There's a lot of times as a buyer, you go into a property excited.
Yeah.
You're like, oh my gosh, I want to buy this house. And your blinders are on to the real nuances of things that could come up in a request for repairs.
Or conversely, how about talking a buyer off the cliff who thinks that a missing cover plate on a switch on the wall is going to kill a deal?
Right.
It's like, hey, let me walk you. Let me help you with this. That's the small stuff. Let's get to the big picture.
That brings up a funny, quick anecdotal story. The very first house I bought, Because when you're going through the buying process and you look at your physical inspection, anything that's health and safety is often called out in red, right?
Yes.
And so it's like, there is no chimney cap, there's no spark arrestor on the top of the chimney, could cause fire and fire hazard. And of course, it's a composite roof, 1960.
No dampener gapper, right?
Right.
The thing you put to keep a gap in the damp.
Right. And I'm not minimizing that. Those are real issues. Those are real safety concerns, especially with the fires right now. They're real. With that said, I was going to back out of the deal.
You're adamant. I remember you
I'm
telling
like,
me.
I'm going to back out of this transaction. If they don't put the spark arrestor on the house and this could cause a fire, it says it right there in the report. Well, 15 years later when I sold the house, the spark arrestor is still next to the chimney in the box on the roof.
Not installed.
Not installed.
Yeah.
So, I'm not saying that in like a grandiose way, but all I'm saying is, to your point, when you're representing buyers and you're helping them navigate the process, part of that value comes in mitigating emotions.
Yes.
Helping them understand managing emotions, how to sidestep potential landmines of the appraisal, of the request for repairs, termite. What is the historical value? What are some of the improvements that might be? I mean, there's a lot of big dollar improvements that homeowners make, whether it's a new HVAC unit and a new roof, but yet you walk in and you're like, well, shoot, the kitchen's not done in the bathroom.
Or how about what looks like a big dollar upgrade by the seller, and you have to break it to the buyer and say, that is like the lowest end of Home Depot that you can put in a house. But it looks so beautiful and new. Well, it is new and it's beautiful now.
Right.
But that's got a wear life of about 6 months.
For sure. I can tell you, when I was selling real estate up in the San Gabriel Valley, we walked into a home that had been recently renovated, and it was a beautiful, looked like one of those cast iron antique bathtubs. And I don't know what possessed me, but I grabbed the lip of it and thinking it was not going to move, and I picked it up. The tub was plastic.
Oh, geez.
And this is in today's value, a $2.5 million home renovation, and it's a plastic bathtub. I mean, so all of those things, your agent brings value to point out true costs, true things that are way outside of just identifying the house. So those are some things that, as you're representing your clients, or if you're looking for a professional agent, you know what, there's a lot to the transaction other than just identifying the house.
Yeah, and I think that's the next big challenge, is being able to express that properly and the value of it. Because we've kind of gone through a process here, right? It's like, oh my God, it's August, whatever it was, 17th, here come the new forms. How many times have these forms changed?
Oh,
right?
Every 6 months.
And how are we doing it? Who are we allowed to ask for the commission? Who are we not? How are we going to negotiate it? Can I ask them directly in the offer? Do I have to do an SPVB? It's like, oh my God, this is so crazy. And I think we've gotten to a point where buyer's agents, for the most part, have said, okay, I'm going to get my BRBC. Don't worry, buyer, you're never going to have to pay any of this, just so I can submit it. Right. And then the seller looks at it, and whatever they spit out, 99% of the time, they're just like, okay. And they tell the buyer, don't worry, you don't have to do anything. I'll just take what they're giving me. And that's the gap right now. That's where the majority of the erosion is. It's in the weakness and inability of buyer's agents to express their value and get paid for it. And where that's going to change, and I think it's going to be the longest part of the process is you're going to have to put some of this burden on the back of your buyer. If 100%. We don't start putting the burden on the back of the buyer, the seller is just going to keep going lower and lower and lower, and 100%. Pretty soon buyer's agents are going to be out of the business. So I think that's where we're at now. Buyer's agents are getting paid what sellers are telling them they're going to get paid.
Right.
Very few we've seen in escrows and transaction files that are showing that a buyer is picking up that extra 0.5% that you had asked for originally, that you think you're worth, and you're willing to work for 3/4 or half of that and just settling. That needs to change.
Right. And as a buyer agent too, a secondary point as we wrap up on really stemming the erosion is the reality for you as a buyer's agent to be able to paint that story of how great your buyer is.
That's it, a story.
To that seller. Yep. You know, how qualified they are, how they've been looking, the work history and all the things to really paint that picture that seller is going to feel incredibly comfortable with. You know what? I know that buyer really loves the house, wants the house, and is going to perform on closing this transaction. That is huge because there's a tremendous amount of value to a seller to have a great buyer. that's going to perform. And how do you make that connection as a buyer's agent that your buyer is that buyer, right? So it's really, when we were selling houses on the listing side, we always used to say, you know what, Travis, it's really important that to offer a great commission, because the great commissions attract the great agents that attract the great buyers, right? Because if you're a seasoned agent, you're going to work with buyers that are, you know, really ready, willing, able, highly qualified, because you're a seasoned agent. So that's why, you know, we want to make sure we're offering a great commission to that agent. Well, that's still true. Now the onus is on that buyer's agent to be like, hey, I'm bringing you a fantastic buyer with a 750 FICO that's putting 35% down. They love the house. They want their kids in this school, or whatever the scenario is. That really paints that picture that, like, gosh, I know that buyer is going to perform.
Yeah, you know, you brought up a very good point, is we're talking about, we really got to let the buyer know our value. Super important. And we're not there yet. You know, some agents are good at it, but I'd say the majority are not. But to have a great buyer's agent market,
Absolutely.
you better be able to let your buyer know why you're of value. You better be able to let a seller know why you're of value and why you have a great client. So part of being a great buyer's agent is finding great clients.
100%.
And third is making sure agents know that you're a great agent. To your point, I mean, in your career, I know I have a couple offers come in. I'm like, I know it's not the best. Let's work on it.
Right.
But this is the agent you want to work with. This
100%.
one, I'm telling you right now, there's going to be trouble.
Right.
And we know. And so it's kind of a three-pronged thing going on here. We just got to be a game
For sure.
on the buyer side.
So the moral of the story, and to wrap up this video in this edition, is really look at your value, or start to articulate your value on the buyer agent side, and really create that value proposition that's completely outside of just identifying the property.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what are your systems? Like,
Yeah.
one of our agents came to me, sent me an email, and he goes, "Oh, do you see that email for that offer?" I go, "Yeah, that was a great cover letter." He's like, "That's my system. This is what I do."
Right.
Like, you're going to get a heads up. That listing agent's going to take notice, man.
For sure.
So get those in place.
Yep. How you present an offer is highly, highly critical as a buyer's agent. So that's it.
Yep.
All right. Well,
Fantastic.
thanks you so much for joining Travis and I on this edition of the Agent Playbook. And until next time, make sure you're out there and
Showing your value.
showing your value.